Hi, everybody, and welcome to The Love That Loves You Back, a podcast between myself, Valerie, and my dear friend Jonathan Fremantle. I'm an artistic miscreant, otherwise known as a self-described third-generation art professional, who's currently raising a fourth-generation art professional, uh, born in the depths of the Pale of Settlement in the former Soviet Union, and partly raised in Australia, lived and worked in London and Paris, and 15 years ago, by a quirk of fate, relocated to Zimbabwe, where I'm the co-founder of First Floor Gallery Harare, trying to figure out life, education, art, and predominantly love of art as life goes on. And without further ado, over to Jonathan.
Thanks, Valerie. Yeah, Jonathan Fremantle. I grew up in Cape Town and studied in London. I did a long apprenticeship in fine art in the old sense, and have been more making art in one way or another ever since then. I live in Edinburgh now, but I also lived for a while in Johannesburg, where I had Hazard Gallery, and that was the context that I met Valerie about 10, 12 years ago, and just loved the conversation we had immediately about painting and how painting is everything. And that conversation's been a constant source of joy and sustenance over the years. So it does make sense that we share the conversation, and look forward to where this goes.
Yeah, no, I mean, and it usually goes anywhere and everywhere, but somehow we always come back to art, and
Yeah,
because it is the love that loves us back. Thank you very
right.
much for joining us, and we look forward to sharing the journey. Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 9.
Wow.
We're really getting into the 2 digits here. So, and I thought, we would, fall into some element of peer group pressure and discuss art and AI, which seems to be in the zeitgeist. But I thought that it could be really interesting to look at things from a deeply, for me, a historical perspective. And I was fairly triggered by an article at ArtNet about an exhibition by a French Orientalist, Jean-Léon Gérôme, in Doha, that is being reported on ArtNet at Museum of Modern Art, and looking at the images, thinking how remarkably AI generated, looking at some of them, that they look completely removed from, like, they resemble human reality, but they're not at one with it. And I thought this is, in a way, an alien look. And I think AI in some ways is that alien look, because it is of us, but not from us. And which is why whatever images, in my view, are generated by AI 100% do not constitute art, and can only be called sort of visualizations of, because authorship is, part of art. And, our definition of art is shared as being a human activity, and this is not a human activity. But in a way, I think in Jerome's work, the job he was performing was somehow dehumanized. And I think there's a really interesting element of overlap between ethics and aesthetics in a way that exactly, matches this current discourse on AI, because AI cannot be ethical, and it's the aesthetics generated by AI are equally cannot be ethical. And then there is, and I think it's something that doesn't get discussed is often in art history, is how ethics over and aesthetics are actually overlap or play together or very closely related in a sense. I mean, to me, they feel very closely related. Like one day, why is it that the golden section feels right in a
Yeah.
very particular right way rather than, oh, this feels good. It doesn't feel good. It feels right.
Yeah.
Right. How are some of the things that we believe are conditioned by our sense of right and wrong? And
Mm.
that is also quite interesting to me. So over to you. What are your current thoughts on the
But
silliness?
yeah, there's so much in what you've just said. That's a great intro. I mean, to start with the golden ratio, which is it's a really good entry because it's essentially a mathematical formula, which is our own body, but also the same resonance echoed throughout the universe, in spiral galaxies and so on. And it's not so much about navel gazing, because that's, we spoke about that before. It's not that we need to see manifestations of our own being. It's really more that uh, we need to learn about our own isness, through our experience on this planet. We need somehow, and this is where the artist performs a function, we need somehow to be able to look in and look at ourself and our environment and have a deeper experience of it. And the AI issue is it doesn't add any depth to that experience. In some ways, it kind of distances us from it because the we feel it, and it's funny. I've been trawling, Facebook's hilarious because you get your aunt and your grandmother and your cousin. It's become a place where it's certainly not the cutting edge. And so when you put an AI image into Facebook, there's a lot of people who are quite gullible and who don't understand that it's quite clearly AI. It's very obvious to me and you, I'm sure, and most people who are visually fed by the visual world. It's very easy to see when it's an AI image, even if it's really seductive. You just feel it.
Mm,
But then there's a whole the ethics of it where he has a whole population of people who don't know that it's AI and are being seduced by these strangely altered images or reduxes of historical images that are. I mean, I saw one of an Indian woman who was part of a ancient tribe that we didn't know about, that and they're all giants, and there's this huge woman, and you're thinking that's just a blatant lie. And it's a seductive image because here you have a woman who's twice the size of her villagers, and you think, wouldn't be that be amazing? And so that's just a kind of blunt ethical problem where you kind of retelling mythological uh, truths and they become represented as lies. But then there's also the more subtle problem, which I think is the most vindictive of it, which is he has an image of a beautiful landscape, let's say, and it's funneled through AI to make it more spectacular or more beautiful or whatever. The islands are more verdant, the sky's brighter, there's 50% more stars in the sky, whatever. There's something, it's bumped up. And it's not exaggerated by a human who's having an experience which he doesn't have a language for, so therefore like Van Gogh's Starry Night, he goes, here's an experience I'm having. I need to change the picture to explain how amazing it is. It's really just saying, here's the landscape, and we're just turning the volume up so that it appears to be more spectacular. And all that does is numb you to the true glory of that landscape. You
mm,
become, it's like a junk food or a sugar fix. You need this intense experience to enter into the mystical. And it's back to that problem of how do we have a full and magical and meaningful journey on this short life that we have. And that involves um, that connection, making a connection, and it really doesn't help that connection. What it does is present something which is a lie, which makes the real experience somehow flatter. And that's a big
Yeah.
problem. Yeah.
Because I think, I mean, so many of our experiences right now are mediated, and what you're
Yeah.
saying is like need unmediated experiences, and AI is not just a form of mediation, it's actually putting an obstacle
Yeah.
to being but something you said about people on Facebook and you know uh for me, just brings up the issue that I hadn't thought about is like, and it's a very clear connection once you mentioned a connection between kitsch and AI, because AI is kind of a new form of kitsch which has been with us. And I'm particularly fascinated by kitsch because it is a really kind of strange form of popular culture, right? And bad taste. It's a very committed form of bad taste where it's how do you explain, good taste to anyone without sounding super elitist, right? And saying,
Yeah,
well,
sure.
it's uh and you say, well, the reason you find this good is, and then there'd be so many people, and who see art from the outside and see it as elitist, who say, oh, the reason you think it's good is because it's expensive, and the reason you hate on my McDonald's meal is because if you put it in a Michelin star, no, you wouldn't.
Yeah,
No,
sure.
you wouldn't. Right. And I mean, yes, there's that middle brow, right? Middle section where, you know, everyone can be in the gray zone, but when something is good, it's good, and we know it to be good. The question is, how do you communicate, given the fact that, we live in a society that has been already visually desensitized to, genuine experiences. Also, in terms of looking at their own lives, right? The number of, and we're all sort of conditioned to expect a Hollywood ending. Like that's,
Yeah.
and how often in a conversation you're talking to somebody, and I just said that yesterday to somebody, oh my God, this is like a movie, you know, and you just think, well, why am I comparing? That is ridiculous
Mm.
to compare something to a movie, but then it's become a culture,
Yeah.
cultural companion. So, and are we in a way trapped, right? It's in this paradigm, and how do, at the same time, me, I'm always thinking of, like, I always believe that art history will prevail and this too shall pass.
Yeah.
But I think there could be a moment for people to use AI uh, as for artists to use AI, and I think we're not there yet, but artists can actually employ AI constructively, meaningfully, thoughtfully, and purposefully as a tool. And I know there is an artist and called Lev Manovich,
Yeah.
right? So he's a post-Soviet artist based in the West. He's also an academic and he's a digital
Yeah.
scholar, but he makes work, and I think they're the only AI generated works that ever made any sense to me. And he develops speculative situations that
Yeah.
are reflective of, say, alternative realities in an alternative way. So he's using it to develop like intentionally new situations,
Yes.
right?
That
That
that's
he wants
that's
to
the difference.
reflect on.
Yeah.
And you recognize them as AI, but you also recognize that they're not normal,
Mm.
but they're deliberately not normal, right? That there is an intentionality, and it is that intentionality that I find sensible, right? And that creates a human element that is very, that is meaningful to me, right? And so far, I think he's the only artist that I've
I
that
I
come
came
across.
across there's another guy who I follow. He's a South African artist, Richard Strydom, who's presenting images, AI images that he's kind of spoken into existence. So he's the creator in the way he's weaving the kind of poetry that leads to the image. Um, and the images are quite often quite disturbing. You know, they're images of he's taking a conflict zone that he wants to speak about, and then he's kind of making images that are even more macabre that illustrate that the point he's trying to make. I'm not sure that where they go beyond just a point that he's trying to make, whether they depart into um, something beyond that. But I am intrigued. He's one of the best versions of what we're talking about. And I don't think that, like any new innovation, it's a bit like if Bach was around, he'd 100% be using the tools that we have, electronic music, and he'd be using all of and I also think he would be using ancient instruments at the same time, like all great artists, you're intrigued in what's the sound of that three note flute that was carved millennia ago, and how do we mix that with the sound that I can get through this reverb? Um, so I don't think it's a scary thing. I think what's scary is that we're believing it. It's like it's this
Yeah.
fast food experience, and that's scary. But that's crosses all society. There's so many in all areas. Fashion and the way we digest information. We've got such a low tolerance for sitting quietly and having a meaningful experience in the present moment. And this doesn't, it definitely pushes us further away from that.
Well, I mean, I think we may be becoming technologically sufficiently advanced to actually reach that stage where, that was speculated about in the 70s about the end of work.
Yes.
Uh, it's sort of because which said robotics, automation, and so people are petrified about elimination of what has been described as shit jobs. I mean, things that are genuinely not you. And I feel like, I mean, of course, we're sitting pretty, in the art world because we're the only people whose jobs cannot be replaced
Yeah.
because they already don't exist. It's sort of
Well,
what we
let's talk about that because actually that's the area that's, um, if you're looking at AI and where does an artist kind of pivot, or what is his role or her role? Yeah, I think your thoughts on that are really interesting.
what about being
About
useless?
making the unknown, yeah. This before, I can't remember whether it's in a Zoom or or in a podcast or just normally. Um,
Yeah.
but this notion that that what AI can't replace, essentially, it's an assimilator of what exists already, and that in many ways is what we all are. We're assimilating this past experience, and we're standing in this present moment and looking towards the unknown. Um, and that's where AI fails because all it can ever do is represent the information that's visual information that's already there. We as artists, um, certainly if you're having a deeper experience and you are assimilating, you really are going into the unknown. You're trying, ask any artist and they'll say, the best painting or the best sculpture is the one I haven't made yet, and for sure you're when you do hit the nail on the head or when you do make a work that gives you that buzz, it's as if it came from somewhere else. It didn't come from pre-lived
So
experience.
So I think what it is, and I think this is, and like if I had to crystallize it, is it's making art is about intentionality detached from attachment to outcome,
Hmm.
right? Whereas whenever you're dealing with real world, things that you would
Yeah.
apply AI to, is that there is an attachment to an outcome. And this is our huge freedom, is that and is actually that you have to make a leap of faith, right? And I don't think anyone can program. I mean, I could be wrong and we could be all living in the matrix, but I think that detachment from outcome, right? And having a leap of faith into that unknown, right? And maybe there's not just the red pill or the a blue pill, maybe there's multiple pills, and the fact that it doesn't, but ultimately it doesn't matter which pill. I mean, that's the other thing, is that faith is about not caring which pill, no, having a faith to believe that whatever path you choose is somehow meaningful, and at the same time can be right. And now I think I'm just such a gray zone. It's like really out there. But I mean, for me, the resonance, to get back to the kitsch situation and the fallibility, and how to sensitize, I guess, lay people to the importance of human expression is, I think that is probably, like, that for me is a big challenge, right? Because I think we can solve the art problem, artists, jumping up and down about copyright and being exploited. Well, welcome to the world. That's not the first time. Technology again, it's like, I just wanted to bring up, because we discussed it before, Tim's Vermeer, that silly documentary about a guy who rebuilt all of Vermeer's studio, and he was committed to discovering the secret and he actually does come close to painting something extremely close, because he just believed the whole thing could be reduced to a very sophisticated approach with camera obscura. And technologically, I totally recommend that everyone watches it, because it is spectacularly entertaining to get like a Midwest American being like committing his whole entire life to solving Vermeer. I think it's brilliant, because he goes to spends enormous amounts of money. It's just brilliant. But ultimately, what it produces is, it's very close. It's like a good computer simulation of Vermeer, right? You just want to know how he did it. But he didn't, it's still not Vermeer, because Vermeer is in work, not on the work. And the whole idea of creating a surface rather than creating the substance of things. And that's actually kind of the conversation. But in a very interesting way. And I think this is worth probably thinking through and having another conversation, just the relationship between ethics and aesthetics. That's and we
A
need to
big
possibly.
subject. And I think in just the kind of final point on that Vermeer for me is that no matter how technically you can reproduce something, you can't reproduce the joy, the love, the dedication, the pain, the struggle, all of that stuff which is in the body, which comes out whether you like it or not in your brush mark. And the life that you live um, and your experience on this planet comes through the work you make. So you can have 500 people replicating something perfectly, and yet one of them will glow a little bit more than others, and that has to be to do with the depth of experience somehow.
Well, isn't it, and then once they totally solve for, quantum entanglement, that do the particles, the energy that you imbue the particles of paint with in your brush, do they become quantum, is there quantum entanglement in those particles with who you are and the energy that you don't, and that is what lives on in the work. And that is perpetually somehow entangled with who you are, which is a whole other, this is a totally my situation. Think about it.
Yeah.
Okay. So imagine if we're as artists perpetually entangled with every single artwork, and the conversation that someone is having somewhere like 1,000 miles away with the work is actually triggered by something that is happening to you in real time. It is the most mind-blowing thing to imagine, and just totally, how is this not a premise for a sci-fi feature? That's all I am saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bring it on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on this note, we will leave you all with speculation, and whoever wants to send in suggestions, we'll get ChatGPT to draft a script, on that.
Yeah, yeah.